Dhamma.
Still says 0.
Says
Has it
it is
started
recording.
recording?
It says yes. It says you are recording
Okay.
the call.
All right. So there we go. Now, so really, first off, is really glad to see you back. It's been a while. I know that you were really busy working,
Yeah.
2 jobs, in fact, and so I'm glad to hear that you're in school and you're not going to be so working so hard, and you'll have some time for the Dhamma also. And I'm really pleased to see you back.
Pleased to see you too, Dhammarato.
A lot of stuff has been happening, and we're still moving along. Right now, we're doing a whole lot of data collection for the website. But since you've called and asked about cessation, let me ask you this: where did you hear the word, or in what context?
Oh, that's a good question. In the context of, that's a very good question. So I don't have a particular sutta off the top of my head that I recall seeing this in or anything like that. It's a jumble in my mind right now, but it has to do with the descriptions of the progression of training in samadhi and jhana,
Okay.
and in after following the formless realms, because we have first, second, third, fourth jhana, then we have our formless realms. Following the formless realms, they talk about a cessation of perception and feeling. And at times, I read certain individuals place emphasis on the experience of this cessation. Now, I know there's a lot of differences in how people word things as well when it comes to, phenomenological experience descriptions and such. So it's kind of an odd thought, and it's kind of just a side thought for me, because to me,
All right.
the value that I see in it is it's a direct experiential understanding of all of the things that get imputed on top of experience.
Right.
Basically,
Okay.
a reordering of, it's not me that exists before everything. There is existence, and then if we go into ignorance, we impute on top of existence this thing that we
Okay.
get wrapped up in. Am I on track with that idea of where that is
Well,
in the first place? And
yeah,
have you heard of something
actually,
similar?
what you've done is you've skipped a couple of steps.
Okay.
So let's start right at the very beginning of it. As before we turned the video on, we talked about the Anapanasati Sutta, and the
Yes.
practice of the Anapanasati has various elements to get the student into the first jhana. And then what do
Right.
we do with the first jhana once we're there? All right. And here's the point about that is that until you're in the first jhana, the mind is prone and subject to the hindrances, which means that we're not going to be able to see things very clearly. But once we've gotten into the first jhana, that's when we actually have the ability to see the way that the mind works.
Right.
All right. So we're talking now about the fourth tetrad,
Yes.
the Dhammanupassana, which is step 13 through 16.
Yes.
Now, as a very good way of introducing this, the Dhammanupassana section of the Satipatthana Sutta, number 10 in the Majjhima Nikaya, it has a kind of a complete sequence to where in the Anapanasati Sutta, it's an overview.
Right. Okay.
So let's go now to the fact that the first kind of objects that a student is going to be seeing will be the hindrances when he's looking.
Right.
And then we
Yes.
remove those hindrances. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the Satipatthana Sutta, after the hindrances, then the next item on their list are the things like the 7 factors of enlightenment are mentioned, the 5 aggregates are mentioned, and the 4 noble truths and the
Yes.
Eightfold Noble Path are mentioned as mind objects.
Yes.
And what
Now,
that's
may I ask a
indicating,
question?
yeah, sure.
You talk about seven factors. The Bojenka. Is this how you say
The
this in Pali?
Sambojana.
Sambojana. Okay, so when we talk about the seven factors, one of the things that I've heard, and I don't recall a source off the top of my head, is that when we are contemplating within the fourth tetrad of Anapanasati, that seven factors are something that, and it sounds to me like all of the different things that you just talked about, as far as contemplation of Dhamma or Dhammapasa, is these are knowable objects. Does this make sense?
Yes, that's exactly what
Yes.
we're
Okay.
talking about. That in fact, the
Okay.
Eightfold Noble Path is the beginners, which is going to have to remove the hindrances. But once we have those factors of the Eightfold Noble Path in operation or to the completion, that's when they become enlightenment factors.
Got
Okay.
it.
All
Okay.
right. So you could say then that the Eightfold Noble Path is the ABCs of Buddhism, is learning to read, and then
Hmm.
philosophy is uh, then the noble part. Once we learn to
Got
read,
it.
now we can see. Okay. And that the things then that within that um, we would say that the first things that students do when they sit down and begin to practice, they're going to be dealing with hindrances, and that's going to happen for a while until they develop the skill of seeing what is a hindrance and what
Yes.
is dukkha. Once
Yes.
we've finished with the dukkha, now the next thing is to start working with and contemplating and knowing what are the five aggregates, thinking about the five aggregates in the sense of this is not me, this is not who I am. This is very, very valuable. In fact, when we were talking about you taking the class about mathematics, the student will
Yes.
put the me in there of I can't do math, or for me, math
Yes.
is hard. And when we take the self out of it, there's just the math.
That's it.
Okay. So when we practice this way, we actually now in the sitting meditation, in fact, this is the answer to the questions that the student has of what to do next. And I generally say there is no next. It's can you get into a pleasant state right now? All
Right.
right. And the reality is that that next part is actually contemplating and paying attention to the teachings of the Dhamma, because this is all wholesome. If you want some wholesome thoughts, think about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble
Right.
Path, the Sambojana, and the five aggregates.
Nice.
All right.
Right.
So once we spent some
Titisamupada.
time doing that, and we're still, by the way, in the first jhana, we're just working with the first jhana, that's the path to enlightenment.
Yes.
And yet everybody wants the higher jhanas, it's almost like greed.
Yeah, maybe some
Okay.
desire.
Uh, uh, you know that this is common in Thailand, and they do it at many places that they will have bed and breakfast, which means the breakfast is almost always a smorgasbord, or you will have buffets or things like that. You walk into the place, never mind who pays for it, you can eat all you want. And my idea when I was young, when I would do that, is I'm coming here to put them out of
Get
business.
down. Yep.
I'm here. I'm going to eat everything they've got and want more. And I
Yeah.
never was able to do that. 3 or 4 plates full, and that was all I could manage. And that buffet was a whole lot bigger. Okay, so these are
Yes.
the way that we want to look at the higher jhanas is that let's not try to stuff ourselves. Let's
Mhm.
just eat pleasantly.
Yes.
Okay. And so this is where that first jhana lies, is that it's an absolutely pleasant meal when we're
Right here,
working
right
with
now.
it correctly,
Right.
and that we're
Mhm.
paying attention to the Dhamma.
Yes.
Okay, this is the time when we're actually able to get great things out of reading the Dhamma, is because we're reading it with a clear mind and it's not clouded with the hindrances of I, me, or mine.
Yes.
Okay, so when we're doing that, the next step is let's move away from the Satipatthana Sutta back to the Anapanasati Sutta and start looking at steps 13, 14, 15, and 16.
Mhm.
Because the question that you're asking is about step 15 of
Yes.
Anapanasati. And that
Yes.
cessation, in,
Quenching.
let us say it like, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, quenching is how it's
Quenching.
translated in the,
Okay.
yes, and
All
it's
right.
nirodha, I believe, is the Pali. Yeah,
All right. There's
breathing in,
another
I
word
contemplate
for it.
nirodha. Breathing out, I contemplate nirodha. Or is it? It's not vimutti because that's what liberation. What's the other word?
Well, relinquishment or
Yes.
letting go
Oh,
is the 16th
yeah.
step, is to
That's
let it
throwing
go.
back. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. Now, let's talk about quenching and cessation with another word,
Okay.
death. Death. When something quenches,
Oh.
when that fire is quenched, it's
Yeah,
out,
yeah.
it's
Done.
dead. Okay.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
this is the way that we look at it is that it starts with a nature.
Yes.
Everything
Right.
is temporary.
Always
Everything
contemplating
is
impermanence.
moving. So
Yes.
once we go through the Anapanasati to get to the point of the first jhana, and we have been contemplating the Dhamma for a while, now we begin to put it in practice to start watching the flow. Start watching
Ah.
everything is changing. Everything is in
Mm-hmm.
motion, and that
Right.
this actually helps with our practice because, say, the breeze of the wind, or as as Goenka talks about it, the touch of the cloth, and we
Mm-hmm.
can put our awareness there, or we can put it someplace else. That in fact, most of the anicca is the mind jumping from object to object.
Yes.
When we get the mind settled down, now we can see not the mind jumping around, we can see the object itself that we're looking at starting to change.
Yes. Right. Because we
Keyboards
can steady
on the
our,
computer
we can build
get
our,
dirty, right? The
mm-hmm.
screen of
Mm-hmm.
your cell phone gets
Yeah.
dirty. It gets
Mm-hmm.
food on it, it gets spittle on it, it gets all kinds of stuff on it, and sometimes it needs to be cleaned.
Yep.
And a lot of people think that there's something wrong with their cell phone because their touches don't work right, and all they need to do is clean that screen. It's got too much finger oil, too much dirt, too much
Mm-hmm.
accumulation on it. So this is the anicca. Now things appear to move slowly, but in
Ah.
fact they move fairly fast. That just
Very,
one
very quickly.
swipe on that cell phone will cause a mark that you can shine it or look at it in a certain way and begin to see that
Difference.
you've made a mark on there. You just rubbed your
Mm-hmm.
finger on it, but it's left a mark. There's
Yep.
finger oil now on that screen. Okay, so the screen has changed. It's not the same way that it was. Before it was a clean screen. Now it's been wiped with a finger and it's got finger oil on it.
Yes.
Okay. So that's actually now step 15, or excuse me, 13 to 14
Mm-hmm.
is that anything that
Dispassion.
changes is dying.
Yes.
Anything that changes is dying. An example of that would be in an infant in the womb. They know that the fingers, when they're forming, the skin between them, that in fact, in some animals like old fish and frogs and salamanders, they have that webbing still between the fingers. Well, humans do too, but that
Mm-hmm.
webbing dies out.
Falls off.
The webbing between the fingers and toes dies out in because of the genetic codes that are turned on at certain times.
Yep.
So this is kind of the fading away and the dying sequence because everything is changing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That anytime something new comes up, whatever it replaced, the old, is now dead, including
Yes.
this present moment. This present moment is constantly dying as well as a new constant moment, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So this is the fading away and the cessation. And
Yes.
yet we don't want things to die. We want to hold on. Even
Mm.
if we're terrified, we want to remain terrified. An example of that is the kids go to see a horror movie, and when they come out of the horror movie, they want to talk about the horror movie. You're not in the theater anymore. Let the horror movie die. No, I want to keep it alive.
Yes. Yes. Right. Mm.
Okay, so this is how the mind is working is that the mind actually wants stability because instability brings fear. It's part of the natural DNA sequences that we had. That when, let us say, when the deer sees rustles in the bushes, that's something to be fearful about. It may be dangerous. That rustling may, in fact, be a gorilla, or it might be a lion, or it might be your child.
Right.
You don't know what it is, and so we become afraid because you see the false positives would be that, oh, it's my child, and then I'm getting
Right.
eaten. But if
Yep.
I have the thought, the false positive, oh, it's a gorilla, and it happens to me, my child, I'm probably going to be better off, but now the child is in danger
Right.
from me because I think it's a gorilla when it's not. Okay. So, this is the way that we were, let us say, through the various centuries, our DNA comes up to anything that we do not know or understand is possibly fearful. And so people develop the habit of being afraid a lot because things are changing a lot. Things are new a lot. And what is new might be dangerous.
Right.
It's called the fear of the unknown, by the way.
Certainly.
Or in politics, better the devil we know than the devil that we don't. I wish they'd have heard that in 2016.
Yes.
So,
right.
Here is where then that issue of cessation comes in, because anything that's changing itself is going to go through the process of rotting away,
right,
and then dying. Another example would be a laptop.
Right.
The laptop gets old. I've watched laptops get old in my lifetime. In fact, I've got 5 or 6 of them on the shelf in there.
Yeah, I believe this.
They may or may not work anymore because they did get old enough that they were taken out of service. And eventually they die.
Yes.
Now, when they die, here's an important point. It's not so much that the laptop itself died, it was my caring about it that died.
Right.
That this is all in the mind. That when things on the outside are changing, the mind changes naturally too, but we're not mindful of this. We don't see it happening. But the guy, for instance, 3 weeks ago, the guy that was working, visiting houses, is dead now. And now there's a student. Okay? That part of you has gone through cessation. Okay? It's possible also that you've gone through relinquish of it, that it's no longer important to you.
Maybe I threw it back.
Yeah, you threw it out. That's what relinquishment,
so that it was never mine to begin with,
or dropping it, or getting rid of it, or all of that. All of this stuff that they talk about in Buddhism, all winds up being in that point of relinquishment, step 16 of Anapanasati.
Right.
And there is, I'm not sure, I haven't seen the sutta itself, but Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has another word that he thinks is very good for this. It's called atamayata. You've heard me use this word, atamayata. The word tam means work or do or attachment or involvement, and atam means not doing it. So atam maya means I'm not going to do that. I see this as maya. Why? Because what I used to like has now rotted, deteriorated, gone, died, and I've given it up. I've thrown it back. The relinquishment then is in the fact of I see that as Myra, and now I'm going to relinquish it. I'm going to throw it out.
I'm not going to hold that anymore.
Exactly. That in fact the Maya or the Mara was not that it died. It's that I don't want it to die.
Yeah. Right. Or that I can stop it from dying.
So there's a great big deal of difference then for a person to whether they quit a job or whether they're fired. Because if they quit
Right.
the job, it's much easier to relinquish it. I don't need that anymore. It could be the same job, and the boss is going to fire me tomorrow, but I quit today. And if I quit, that's the dropping it. That's the throwing it out.
Yes, right.
But
That's freedom.
if
Yeah.
we wait one more day and then get fired, now all of a
Right.
sudden, oh, I
Oh,
was that job. I needed that
yep.
job. Oh, poor
I
me.
gotta
I
go
got
find me a
fired. I'm
new
no
job.
good now.
Yep.
Okay.
I like
So
that one.
the question is that how are we going to deal with this cessation, this death? Because things are dying left, right, and center on a regular basis every minute. And if we see it as dangerous, we haven't let them go yet.
Right.
And so that's where the relinquishment comes in, is we've got to let go. We got to accept the way things are.
Hmm.
And it's a whole lot easier to do it if it's our choice than if we think that we're the victim and that it happened to us.
Right. Makes sense to me.
Okay? So things are going to die. Your choice about how you're going to handle it. And we can do this if, in fact, the mind is free from the hindrances. We can see, oh, it did die. I can handle that.
Right.
But if the hindrances of attachment and caring and
Oh,
love and
right, right. Yes, 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 yes. If we have doubt and if we have restlessness and all of this, and we want to just do something to keep it going, or if we're just attached just to the sense desire of it, to pushing or pulling on whatever it is that I'm feeling, so I can try and not feel one thing or another. But I never had control over any of it to begin with. The feelings just come up and go.
mm-hmm.
But without recognizing this, we get stuck in attachment. In not attachment. What's the word I heard recently? Upadana, the Pali word for clinging.
Well, tanha is the
Tanha, craving,
grasping,
right?
and then the clinging or the desire is the upadana. That's when you're really stuck.
Upadana, right?
Okay,
That's when you
but in
really
fact,
feel like
it
that's
would be
yours.
good
You've
to bring
assumed
this
it.
back. Hmm. There is a sutta about I Kasi Gautama, I think is her name,
Okay.
and that she came to the Buddha carrying her dead and almost rotting infant.
Mm-hmm.
And she had been to every charlatan and every magician in the neighborhood trying to get her to every doctor. They said, no, we can't do it. And so finally she wound up at the Buddha, and he gave her a task to do.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, oh, he's going to do some real magic now. And so the task that he gave her to do was to go to 10 different households and bring me a seed. Now, the question is, was it a mustard seed or was it an anise seed? Mustard and anise are pretty close together. They call it a mustard seed. I think that they haven't been to India and don't know what an anise seed is. But if you've
Okay.
ever been to an Indian restaurant, that's the mouth purifier that you use at the end of the meal. It's either going to be where you check out and pay the fee, or sometimes they'll have it on the table. Little
Okay.
grains. Okay, so she went to house to house to house to house, lots of houses, and she finally came back to the Buddha because what he said is you've got to get an aniseed, but only from houses or households that have never known death. And she
Right.
couldn't find a house that didn't know death. And she kind of figured it out on herself, on her own, that death is here, this baby that I'm carrying. And so she came back without that corpse, but she
Mm-hmm.
did come back with Dhamma. She came back with and became a nun, right? She
Aha.
had to let that baby's corpse go. She had to drop it. It had already died. The cessation was complete, but she
Yeah.
carried that infant. Okay, that is the upadana.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
carrying something that you don't have.
Right. Yep.
Okay, this is why I've often used the word caring,
Yes.
because anything that we care about, we carry it.
Yes.
And it's
Right.
okay to carry it as long as it's useful, valuable, and wholesome. But when it goes
Right.
bonkers, when it goes south, when it dies, we got to let it go.
Yeah. Otherwise, we end up with Upadana, which has an as an underlying basis the Tanha, which has
Mm-hmm.
underlying basis the Vedana,
Okay,
right?
exactly. So the cessation then really comes in that level of upadana. That
Mm-hmm.
when we care about something and we lose it, we'll go into a woeful state. We will die. And
Right.
okay, that this the four woeful states would be a hell
Mm-hmm.
or a hungry ghost or
Animal.
a dumb animal
Mm-hmm.
or the Ashura, which is a heavenly warrior that is afraid of all the other heavenly beings. So that was fear. So we have anger, we have
Mm-hmm.
desire, we
Yep.
have stupidity, and
Yes.
we have fear. And
Right.
fear is the most basic one of these. That's why the Ashura
Mm-hmm.
is the last on that list. Um, and as a side point, that the one that's most common of all of those is the dumb animal
Right. We
in
just go
our
right back
West,
into
because we do
reactivity.
what we're told to do. We're given something
Mm-hmm.
to do. We don't want to do it. We're attached to getting away with it, but we do it anyway, and we wind up feeling bad.
Yeah.
All right. So
Everybody, nobody smiles.
that's why we have to let go of things, because things
Mm-hmm.
are constantly changing, things are constantly dying. Okay. So here's an interesting question for you. I've got, let us say, several old laptops. I won't describe them at all, but they are all stacked up together in the other room. Why didn't I actually throw those things away if I actually did relinquish them?
Old data.
The answer is I haven't fully let go of them. What I
Ah, okay,
have
okay,
done is
okay.
let go of them being laptops,
Right.
but I don't see them as laptops anymore. I see them as, oh, there's memory in there. Oh, there's a hard drive
Old
in
data.
there. Oh, there's,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's
they're
what
just
I'm doing, because those things
components.
haven't died. Only the laptop itself is dead,
Right,
but the
because the
memory is
laptop
still
is
good.
the thing that you use.
Hmm. But
You
the
and when you're done
components,
using
many
it,
of them are
laptop's
still
gone.
okay. But
Right.
I don't
Yes.
have but I don't have any use for them, so I'm not going
I
and
guess.
digging up that stuff. Yeah, I don't have any need for it. I've got everything I
Right.
need.
Right. And
And
because
then,
you
in
have
fact, if I
composure
did move
and
houses,
establishment of mind, you know that they're there.
hmm but if I changed houses, if we had to
Yeah.
get moving vans and stuff like that, those
Yeah.
things would go into the trash. I wouldn't take them with me.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I can
All
dig.
right.
Yeah.
That's a big point, that while we are sitting in sedentary, it's actually work to throw things out. But
Yes.
when we are mobile and moving around, I learned a lot about that by moving around India, moving from Thailand, moving from various countries, is the more I moved, the less I took with me.
Yep. You don't want to carry. Got to pack light.
Don't want to carry all of that stuff.
Right.
I have gone to the airport from time to time, haven't done it in a long time, but there will be a family, and the amount of space that they take up is dwarfed by the amount of space that their luggage takes up.
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
they brought everything that they ever owned with them. They had to dig up flowers out of the garden and put them in the bag.
Just have something familiar
and
to smell.
instead
Yeah.
of right, instead of wisely figuring out what is got life left in it and
Yeah.
what is dead.
Mm-hmm.
This is the whole
Mm.
point, so that we can now, once something is dead, let go of it.
Right.
Well, if that's true, guess what? Almost everything that you've ever done is dead now.
Mm-hmm.
All of our past, including that memory of, oh, math is hard when I'm a kid.
Yes.
Right. We can let
Right.
that die. We don't have to
Yeah.
hold on to that. I know many thousands of people who will, in fact, say, I'm not good at math. And they don't even
Mm-hmm.
know whether they're good at math or not, because they're not trying it, because they've already
Yeah.
decided that it's not good, because they had one point of time when
Yeah.
they missed a question or something.
This is one of the ways that I like to think about Sankara. Is one of the translations I always hear is formations, and formations make sense to me. But one of the other translations that I really like is determination. And when I think about sankhara in the form of determinations, it can make them kind of easy to, oh,
Oh,
look at what's up.
exactly. I like
Yeah,
that one. That's
right.
one. I had heard it a long time ago, but it didn't register. But now it's registering because
Yeah,
we make a lot of determinations along. We make decisions along, and then the things change, but
yeah.
we're still
We keep
clinging to
chugging
it.
on those same determinations. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. Yeah, and then yeah, and it used to be that I thought that after a while I thought like sankhara is one of the five aggregates. Yes.
Yes, and none
Yes.
of that
Okay.
passed as me. What
Right.
happened to that
Mm-hmm.
kid when he fell out of the tree? What happened to that kid when he fell out of a
Mm-hmm.
different tree? What happened to that kid when he had a motorbike wreck? What happened to that kid when
Mm-hmm.
he was chased by with the police? It's all dead now. It's gone.
Done. Yep. Mm-hmm.
We can let go of that. We've got room for more
Yeah.
baggage if we can throw all the dead baggage out.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Everything gets more streamlined. Everything is much cleaner.
Hmm.
Maybe
And
like
we tend to
slicker.
cling to the recent past also. Like, for instance, an argument that we have for someone, we'll go away thinking about that argument rather
Right.
than letting it go. The argument died.
Right. The person that you
Maybe
were
Aunt
mad at is
Susie
gone.
died too because I killed her in
Mm-hmm.
the argument. I got so hot about her, I killed her, and so she's gone. But I
Never
can't
worry
relinquish
again.
her in the mind. I can't let her go. I keep carrying Aunt Susie's corpse around with me.
Oh, like the telltale heart.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, he
Hmm.
hears the heart tick tick tick. It's no heart. It's just in the mind, but
It's
it's there for
all
him.
in the mind, exactly.
Yep.
So that's where the
Mm-hmm.
relinquishment comes in. Once we can see the process of it changing, fading away, making differences, it's not the same as it was, and now it's dead. Okay? So, old age, sickness, and death.
Mm-hmm.
Nietzsche is the old age. The sickness is that things are changing and they're deteriorating. That
Mm-hmm.
laptops get old, cars get old. Do you know of a 10-year-old car that gets newer every year?
Okay. Sorry, I had to coordinate for cats and dogs real quick. What were you? I'm so
Uh
sorry.
huh.
What were you saying? You said something about old age,
Yes,
sickness, death,
old age,
anicca,
sickness, and death
pitta,
is step
anatta.
15, is step 13, 14, and 15. Old
Right.
age, sickness, and death, the cessation, the rotting away, the going away, and it's gone now. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have to let things go. So the anicca means that everything is changing, everything is getting old, then it gets
Mm-hmm.
sick.
Mm-hmm.
It's not up to scratch anymore.
Right.
The
It
brand
develops
new car
disgustion.
gets a scratch on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's already deteriorating. In fact, that car was not anywhere near as good as it was when it rolled off the factory floor. The moment that it rolled off the factory floor, it gets starting to rot before it ever gets to the dealer. And then it
Mm-hmm.
gets driven around before you get to buy it. It's an old car already.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's in the process of deterioration. But when I get it, it's going to really deteriorate. And then it's going to
Can't believe.
die.
Mm-hmm.
That in fact, here's a point. Um, Antique automobiles actually prove this point. Why? Let us take the Model Ts that Ford made millions of them, right? How
Mm-hmm.
many Model Ts are still around?
Right.
Maybe
I don't know.
100, maybe
Yeah.
200.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and all those other millions of them died, right?
Yes.
Guess what? Those
Mm-hmm.
100 or so, 200 or so that still exist, they exist because they were continuously being made new. Someone was
Right.
not willing to relinquish it. They
Yes.
wanted to make it new again. And
Yes.
so most of the stuff that was in that original Model T is not there. The paint's
Gone.
new paint.
Yep.
Okay, the original
New
water in
headlights.
the radiator was
Yep.
gone. Maybe the radiators had to have been repaired. It made new again, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even when we have antiques, that does not prove that things
Right.
last forever. Nothing lasts forever.
Right.
Everything dies.
Yes.
And we can see that from a position of not having any hindrances, and we come up with the feeling of hot diggity dog. Things do change, they do die. Wow, and I
Yeah.
can see that. I can
Hmm.
recognize that process, and so I do not get into the danger of hanging on to something that's already dead. I can throw it out, I can let it go, I can
Yes.
relinquish it. I can no longer have to work with it. I don't have to mess with it anymore. Ata
Right.
mayata. I don't have to mess with it anymore. It's gone now.
Hmm.
So that's the way that we look at it, in the sense of this is the fulfillment of the teaching of the Buddha, and it's still all done in the first jhana, because we can
Right.
see all of that stuff. We can go through the hindrances, finish that off, get into the actual wholesome Dhamma itself, and then we can begin to see for sure that everything is rotting away.
Right.
When you brush the dog, look at the dog hair that's coming off the
Hmm.
dog. Okay?
Hmm.
Everything is changing. Everything is changing. And because it's changing, it's getting sick. More and more
Hmm.
sick. Things get old and then they die.
Done.
They get old, they get sick, and they die. And am I going to be clinging to that, or am I willing to let something new happen?
Right.
And so, one of the things that dies away is our feeling of being a victim, because the
Hmm.
victim is the one who is clinging and saying, oh, I don't want it to be that way. It's got to be that way. Therefore, I'm a victim to that change, rather
Hmm.
than us being really okay with it.
Yes.
And so that's where the confidence
Or
comes.
exclusionary. They also get exclusionary with the upadana. Like if they have feelings they don't like, well, I can't have these feelings. Can't have them. And so they try to do things to change that too.
Hmm.
But
Well,
it's about acceptance then, yeah? Accepting that these aren't your feelings. They're just coming and
that's
they're
the
going.
important point, right? We have to
Hmm.
accept that things are dying. We
Yeah.
have to accept
Right.
that things have gotten old,
We
and we
don't
can
control that.
anticipate that if it's old and it's sick, it's going to die.
Probably going to die. Yes, right. Yes. Yes, because it would then in this way it's kind of useless to grasp at it because we understand
Hmm.
this is the nature of things. We know that, like, say, if someone calls and talks about someone having died, we might be able to tell them, yeah, that's probably what happens after they're born.
Hmm.
Hmm. And then you could
So,
celebrate life rather than focusing on that idea.
so I think it was just it's probably 6 months ago. We had a puppy, and the puppy died,
Right.
and Kitty cried. And Mom explained to her, and I explained to her that look at how much fun you had with that puppy.
Yeah.
Instead of missing her now and wanting her to be there so that you can create the joy that you had with the
Right.
puppy, you can recreate that joy right now without the puppy. That the
Right.
puppy was not it. That when we
Right.
attach to the puppy itself, we miss out on um, the benefits. And the
Yeah.
benefit is that she had a lot of fun and amusement. But now that the puppy's dead, she feels bad.
Hmm.
Let's
Right.
remember the puppy and remember how much fun you had.
Hmm.
And then we can let that go too.
Hmm.
That we can kiss anything that dies, we can kiss it goodbye, we can hold it fondly for a moment, getting ourselves into a good state, and then we can let it go,
Right.
relinquish it, throw it out.
Hmm.
Because the only possibility is to carry something around that we don't need to carry around, feeling
That
bad
was
about it.
never ours to begin with.
It is never ours to begin with.
Hmm.
And when we can get our mind in a really, really good state. Now, here's the part where a lot of people, especially the beginners, misunderstand, is that this is the teaching of the Buddha is not about complete non-doing.
Right.
It's about wise doing and
Right.
wise non-doing.
Right.
That if we can see things clearly, then we can choose what to do. So the classic example is the guy has a job and he doesn't like the job.
Hmm.
Instead of quitting the job because he doesn't like it, which is what people are tend to do, he will do anapanasati and get himself into a really good position, and then he can go and do that job happily. And if he
Yes.
starts to hate it again, he can go back into anapanasati, get his mind back together again, and then go back and do what he wants to do.
Yes.
And over time, he can begin to see that all the problem here was not that I didn't like it, it was that it was unwise. And
Haha.
and now through wisdom, I can quit that job
Right.
because I'm in a good mood and I can really see what's going on and recognizing that this job is dead meat. I need to let it go.
Hmm.
But we can't do that when we're full of hindrances.
Right. Because
Otherwise,
you're
we'll
going to
just
be
keep
pulled.
throwing good things out because we can't see
Mhm.
because we're only working with our bad feelings about it. But when we can come out
Right.
of our bad feelings into really good feelings, now we can use wisdom to make good choices.
Right. Because we see things without so much concocting.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question then,
Or
just relating
determination.
to, or determination. Exactly. Yes, determination. Yes, because concoction is another translation I've heard for sankhara.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, concoction, determination,
And
formation. All
and
of
the
these
term that I
things.
often use is a pile of junk.
I love it. All of these things are there. They're necessary basis for experience. So there's
Mm-hmm.
no reason to appropriate them. There's no
Right.
reason to grab them. And that's what we're seeing when we throw back. What is the Pali for throwing back? What is it? What is it in the
Well, that
last?
would be atamayata. That would be
Dhammarata.
throwing,
Okay, got
yeah,
it.
just throwing it out,
Throwing it out, being done
relinquishing
with
it,
it,
letting it
which is
go.
part of our right effort. Yes,
Mm-hmm. Right.
relinquishing
Well,
unwholesome,
I I would say
because
yes.
it's unwholesome to appropriate things that are not yours, that are not given. Right.
Uh, so here's where the cost benefit
Oh,
analysis
interesting.
idea comes in.
Okay.
You see that before we could only see one side of it. Oh, I like this. But when we
Right.
begin to recognize that, oh, my attachment to it is causing me pain.
Right. Yes,
If
it's the
I would let
liability to
go of it,
suffer that's the problem.
mm-hmm,
It's not
right.
the
So
suffering, not because I don't want to manage my suffering. I want to end it.
exactly. And
Right? Yeah.
okay, and so when we do the cost benefit analysis, we begin
Mhm.
to see that the benefit that I'm getting out of this is not as much as the trouble that it's causing.
Drop.
And so
Hmm.
we can let it go because we're not getting the benefit out of it, that the suffering or the dukkha outweighs the benefit.
Yes, right. And
So
that's not really ever
the
going to lead to
example of
any
that,
good cultivation.
uh-huh. So
Like when
here's
you're in
an
that, you're in
example.
hindrance. Hmm.
The example is that you got benefit when you were a kid getting mommy
Yeah.
to comfort
Ah,
you when you couldn't do the math. And you saw the
right.
benefit of that. Now you're beginning to see
Yes.
that, hey, that benefit is little compared to the suffering
Yeah.
that I was having. Let me
Right.
now throw all of that out and
Apply
come
that.
back to something new.
Hmm.
Let the math
Get
be
back to a
something
wholesome
brand
state.
new.
Right. Yeah. Stay in input mode.
Precisely so, rather than processing mode, because when we're
Yes.
processing, what we're processing is the old determinations.
Yes. They're coming up again and they're tainting what's
And
there,
they're
what's already there as a
exactly
bare experience. Yes. And if we just allow that to come through, then we don't have to worry so much about it. It was something you had told me a while ago when you talked about investigation. I don't remember if we were talking about the aggregates or about what in particular, but we were talking about investigation of the Salayatana.
right. Okay,
Did I say that word
that's
correctly?
the
Okay.
that's the actually what we come up with when we mix input with old stuff.
Oh, yeah. Okay. 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 That makes sense. Because as a
Okay.
necessary base for the Salayatana to operate is that Sakya Diffi. Is this right?
Hmm. Okay. So
Okay. Okay.
it's
Okay.
the Salayantana then is reality mixed with our determinations about it.
Okay.
And when we
Oh, and
stop
this is why
doing
you
the
said look to see
determinations,
what's there or not
mhm,
there anymore. Like, is there an unspoken rule or is the unspoken rule gone? If it's gone, then we've deconditioned some of the Vedana. Somewhere in Paticca Samuppada, we've put a stop to the cycle, at least in that perception. Is that right?
And right now, the stop.
Yes.
Not worrying about the future, but worrying about, or not worrying, but can we stop it right now?
Right, quench it now, bam.
Right. Can we go, in fact, in this regard, can we go back to input? Can we go back into input mode?
Because if we see the unspoken rule and we toss it out, even if it comes right back, it doesn't matter. It's still the practice. Go back to input, toss the rule. Go back to input, toss the rule. So it's just training the mind to stay more in the context, to be collected.
Of reality, of input.
Right.
Input is reality.
Not of the determinations, not of the formations. Not that they don't arise, but rather that we don't appropriate them. We don't buy them. We don't say, yeah, that's the fucking ticket. That's what reality is anymore. We're no longer fooled by that. We see, oh, that's just what happens. That's just how the thing goes. Am I on the track there?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Now, remember when you said earlier about ending perceptions and ending feelings?
Yes.
This is it. Right. Okay?
Oh.
This is it. Because we stop perceiving, we stop making stories up about it.
And we just see it as the raw thing.
Stories is what gives us feelings.
Right. Because perception is, as a necessary basis, has the aggregates, consciousness. But they're all like the sticks. They all are interdependent, those 5 aggregates. Is this right? So then when we move on to that, to feeling. Yes, and not me. Yes. And when we see that as feeling, we can see it in these different ways, but they're representing that same basic pressure. When we appropriate them, that's where the pressure comes from. Because then we start the cycle of Paticca Samuppada. Is that right? When we have wisdom, we see it for what they are. They're impersonal. They're doing their thing. They're happening. We basically are here to look at it, whatever it is that's happening. When this happens, there's no appropriation. Yes. Yes, but we guard the sense gates.
And I don't have to come to a conclusion about it. I don't have to make up a story about it, because the story is what gives me bad feelings.
Yes, and when I focus, this is where wise attention comes in. Yes, is it Yoniso Maniskaro? Is this how you say it?
Sorry, what was that?
Yoniso Maniskaro. It's like wise attention or skillful attention. Because if we pay attention, because this is one of the ways I've noticed this connection between mentality and materiality in experience, because my understanding of attention is it's kind of like consciousness plus intention. Put it together and all of a sudden you lose context. You can get engrossed in something. It can get too one-pointed, and I think most ordinary people have this as a way of seeing the world. Sometimes they'll have attention will contract around something and they won't be able to let it go to see what it is that's going on. So then there's no choice but to perform whatever behavior is determined. But when we see the aggregates as impersonal, we don't have that anymore. We don't have that contraction, I suppose, in the same way. We're not so focused on it that it allows itself to spin up into. I thought perception was one of the aggregates.
Yeah, well, that spinning up is all the perception. We're making up a story.
Yes, because we're saying what it is. Yeah.
We're saying what it is based upon what we've seen before. We're comparing it to the past.
Yep. Okay.
Rather than seeing it as something new all by itself. Okay, and if we would let go or relinquish that past, then we can live in the new now.
Yes. Right. But in order to do that, we need to know what to attend to in those moments. Not as if it's a changing. There's no need to change. It's not like a changing pop quiz, but rather we know that we're attending to breathing, for example. If we attend to the breathing, not in I'm going to ignore everything and breathe and only, let me watch my nose, that kind of thing. Not like that at all, but rather the simple knowing there's breathing. Okay, it's long. Okay, it's short. Okay, yeah, it's breathing. It's not focusing just on one little bit or anything like this, but by having that as the context, when we perform throughout the day and everything like that, this helps us as an anchor to withstand some of these pressures of perceptions and such to remind us to come back to input mode. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good. Good understanding. So what do you do to like you know how the Buddha will say every little bit of excrement stinks?
Sorry, every little
You know
bit.
how of excrement of shit
Uh-huh.
stinks. You can smell it.
Stinks.
Get just the
Mm-hmm.
tiniest bit on your fingers and you smell it. Ah, oh, it's terrible stinky. So when we look at things like practice, and we know there's must be some perhaps that in and of itself is the excrement. But say you smell something like that. Say you smell the excrement. What is the way to root this out? How if you can't see it on the big level?
Well, we don't really need to see things on the big
Okay,
level. And in fact, a lot of the big level is a determination. It's a
makes
concept
sense. Right, because it's all been processed.
that what we can better talk about is seeing a sequence of events.
Okay.
Okay. And the example of that would be when somebody, at let us say just ordinary skill, can catch a ball, a rubber
Hmm.
ball that's thrown to them. They didn't have just one vision of the ball someplace in the air. They had to
Right.
have a time sequence so that they can see the trajectory, they can see where things are going, they can
Right.
see the speed, they can compute so that they can put their hand up just at the right time to catch that ball.
Yes.
All right? So, if we are seeing the ball in the air and then remembering a ball that we had when we were a kid, we're going to start missing information. We might, in fact, or have the idea, oh, you're not supposed to throw balls at me, and then they're going to
Right.
miss the ball.
Right.
Okay, we got to keep watching. Another example that I use is the Formula One race car driver. He's out there tooling down the road at high speed, and the old lady walks out on the path, on the track.
Yeah.
If he has the thought, lady, you ought not be here, he just killed her.
Right. She's done.
He's got to have fast reaction time, but he's also going to have to compute. It's
Yes.
not that he sees where she is, he sees her walking. He sees that
Yeah.
she's coming
Knows
into
where
his
she'll
path.
be and where he'll
And he
be.
has, and all of this is
Hmm.
happening very fast in the mind, but it's a sequence. It's connecting the dots.
Right.
That when the ball moves a few inches in the air, it's a new ball. But I
Right.
can compare it with where it had come from and look at where it's going so that we can compute that. But if we start throwing garbage into our calculation, we're going to miss that ball.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay.
All
I
right, we
see.
got to keep
Yeah.
watching what's
Right.
going on.
And in order to do that, we need to be on garbage collection. That's one of our right efforts. That's one of the ways that we maintain the right effort. Because if we have
Hmm.
garbage, we need to be on garbage collection and the idea of
Right.
computing.
We have to see things that have
We have to see
died
it. Go, hey,
and
get the fuck
stop
out of here.
and
Get out of here.
relinquish them and throw them out
Right.
so that we
And see them
can
in
come
real
back to
time.
input. Go
So
ahead.
can we do and see that in real time? So I see that through samadhi practice, we build the stability necessary to see that in real time. Like I have no doubt about that whatsoever. That you can certainly train the mind to be observant, to have your sense gates guarded, and all of these sorts of things, so that you're ready for action when it's there to be taken.
Hmm.
And you have the clarity of mind, the composure to see what is and is not skillful, to know what is kusala and akusala.
Right.
And
We
that
need
in
to
and of
see
itself,
where things are headed.
yeah, if you can see where it's headed, in and of itself, that's if someone were to know what was wholesome and unwholesome right off the bat, I mean, that's the sodapan, yeah. And so when they are in practice, though, after that, that's when my question comes up thinking, okay, so I see where something's wholesome. We know that really the only answer is interruption of what would you call it? The regularly scheduled programming, I guess. If you
Exactly.
if you see where
That's
something's going,
another good word for determinations. It's a
yes, right, yes,
regularly scheduled programming.
yes. If you can read the TV guide, but then what I see is after that, the Sakatagami, the Anagami, and most especially the Arahat, they not only read the TV guide, but they also know how to interrupt that programming. And for the Arahat,
Exactly. They
I
know
don't
how
think
to
he
turn
needs the
that
guide so
TV
much
off.
anymore. Yeah,
Because,
but for
yeah,
the
shut the
Sakatagami
channel.
and the Anagami especially, they know how to stop it real quick, whap, arrest
Hmm.
the process. So then, of course, the rest of one's right
And
effort
the
is
soda
to
pond, the
put forth
level of
the
the
state.
soda pond is
Yes.
the one who knows that this has got to be done.
Ah, I see. I
He's
see.
the
I see.
one
They're
who
just getting it
knows
going.
that
They're
we've
they're
got to
chugging it.
get to right. We cannot
Yes.
continue to let this desire and this ill
Right.
will run our lives. We're going to
And
make a change here.
they know that this is the way to make that change.
Hmm.
This is the elimination of doubt. That we know the program works. This one that we learned, we have faith in that where it came from. And then not just that, but that faith is replaced by it's unshakable, it's imperturbable faith because you directly experience time and again. And the Buddha, he said it, and it works. And so then we completely do away with doubt in that case, as far as what we're doing, um, and how to do it, I guess. So it's just a matter of doing it at that point. Then is that
Remembering. That's the point. No,
right?
it's to
Being
remember.
recollected. Okay.
To remember to do it. To remember to throw that stuff out. That it's dead now. And
Right.
it stinks and it's painful.
I
You got to remember to
see.
do it.
Yes, and this is why sometimes the Sotapan will have dukkha present, is because they will maybe forget to guard against sense desire or ill will. Is this right? Or perhaps they are
Hmm.
still
For a while, but he'll figure it out. He'll figure out that this is dukkha, and he'll drop it. To where ordinary people, they can't figure it out
guaranteed.
that it's dukkha. They won't drop
No,
it.
they only know how to go back to sensuality.
Hmm.
Okay, got it. And then when we look at, see, this is one of the questions I had when we talk about fetters as of recently. Is when we talk about fetters, we talk about the fourth and the fifth fetters, and it seems striking to me that they're bookended by, you got five fetters for the Arahat path, and then you have three fetters for Sotapan path and fruition. And so I wonder what is so special about these two middle fetters that they occupy two stages. Does
They
this make sense?
are, in fact, the
They're
second
they're
noble
big.
truth.
Yes.
And for the Sotapan, the ignorance now is under heavy attack.
Yeah. Okay, I see. I see.
And for the Sotapan, those two fetters of sensuality and ill will are under attack because now, for much of the time for the Sotapan, because he can remember, he can see that stuff is dukkha, and he can stop it.
Right. Yes,
And
and
then the
even if he
Sotagami
forgets
is
to
the one
stop
who's
it, he'll
gotten
still.
pretty good at that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that the
Right. Okay.
Anagami one has gotten really good at it. But the
Done.
difference between the
Done.
Anagami and the Arahat is that the Arahat, he through wisdom, didn't go anywhere near it.
He doesn't need it anymore. He doesn't
Okay,
need to
so the
stop it.
ordinary person, using the analogy of getting shot by the arrow, the
Yeah.
ordinary person gets shot by the arrow, and he wants to know who shot him. I'm a victim
Mhm.
here, all of that. Okay, so the
Yes. Right.
Sotapan, he can get shot, and he wants to pull that arrow out.
Hmm.
Okay, he wants to pull the arrow out. And he's not going to give any buff about it. He's going to get what he needs to do and get that arrow pulled out. Okay, so
Yes.
the Sotagami does not hardly get hit even in an arrow storm.
Ah, okay, because
Uh-huh.
most of the time they're diligent, most of the time they're guarding the sense gauge, most of the time they have recollectedness and they have
Mhm.
composure. Is that
All
is
right.
that why?
Right. So
Okay.
the Anagami is the one who can see those arrows in the air and dodge them.
Got it, got it,
And
got
the
it, got
arrowhead is wise enough to stay away from
it.
arrows.
Yeah, he just
so that
doesn't go
there's
anywhere
no
to shoot
arrows in
arrows.
the air. He doesn't have to play dodgeball. He's in the
Right.
safe place now.
He's on the other shore. Okay, I see that. That makes sense. I can dig that.
That's where
Okay.
the wisdom comes in. Is you stay away from places that are dangerous. You will not ever
Right.
find an arrowhead in a bar. He doesn't go
Right.
there. He knows it's a dangerous place.
Yeah, it's a wild place. Yes.
Okay,
That
but
makes
the
sense. Yeah.
anagami will go right by the bar and take a peek into the window and then move on.
Hmm. Yep.
Okay, the sotagami is the one who has his handle on the door, or maybe he's pushing the door open and he says, "Wait a minute."
Right.
and there
Okay.
and
Okay.
and there the sodapan is in the bar
Yeah.
saying, "Wait a minute, what the heck am I doing in here finally?"
Okay. I see that. That's a wonderful way to talk about that. This is wild. Oh, what a beautiful thing that this is so accessible in these ways these days. I can't imagine what it's like for
But
people
it
that don't have
actually is.
ability to get there.
A
Yeah.
lot of the detail is just looking at the natural progression
Yeah.
that we're going to go through. When
Right.
we start off on the path of anapanasati, we begin to start
Hmm.
looking at this dukkha that we've got in the mind, and we can come out of it.
Yes. Yeah. We see that in the first tetrad because we see that there's a dependency there. That when
Hmm.
we put our attention on the right spots, when we acknowledge our experience as it exists, then we end up not having so much trouble. Not just that, but it feels great to set out and achieve a goal. So when you set out for yourself a goal and achieve it for yourself, it's pretty. What do you call that? Gets the cycle rolling, I guess.
Hmm.
Gets
So
the
long as we see the goal
booty
as
bubbling.
something to be done right now, rather than a
Right.
goal as off into the future. Always
Right.
is right now. What have we got to do? Can we throw that
Hmm.
out right now? Can we see the corpse in the mind right now and throw it out?
Am I still breathing right now?
Hmm.
Hmm. So when we see all those things come up on their own and go on their own, and then we do let them go, I can see that the process of and it doesn't mean that they're gone forever. They might come right back, but we can let them go again and again and again and again and again, and that is an amazing skill set that's not really developed normally, because most of the time it's crazy to think about letting something that arises in those manners go even once. People will
Hmm.
look at you insane for thinking in that way, but it certainly makes a hell of a lot more sense than just reinforcing the problem. But because to me the way that I see it at this time is that the main I don't know how you put it in words. The main spiritual problem is suffering. It's not what comes next. It's not what came before. And suffering, it also doesn't happen in the future, in the
Right.
past. It always only right now. You know.
Well, the
So
suffering that we have right now, the dukkha that we have right now, is often expressed as, well, what do we do next?
yes,
Hey,
right. Yeah.
man, let's get not next. Let's get right now.
Yeah.
You
Right.
don't have
Yeah.
to worry about what comes next. Get your mind back into the place that it was before you ask the question of what comes next.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I bet you'll find out too if you do that. There's no other possibility but to find out what comes next if you're here now. Hmm. And that's a good context to establish. One of the questions that I have is about the genesis, I guess, of Anapanasati. So when I look at the sutras, one of the things that I read is that the Buddha also taught the bhikkhus Maranupasa. Is this right? Contemplation of death, recollectedness of death.
Well,
Um,
actually, that's step 15. That's what you started with. That was the original first question. We
right,
have to
right.
contemplate that things are dead. You don't have to go to the cemetery, but it
Mm-mm.
might be a good idea occasionally.
And I remember though that when the Buddha initially taught the full on just recollectedness of death, there were bhikkhus that committed suicide, I suppose is
Hmm.
what the thing was.
And
Is that
so
right? And so he said,
so he
okay,
stopped
guys.
doing that. Right. He
Hmm.
stopped teaching the charnel ground meditations.
Right. But
And
we
he
still
settled
do
then
them
upon
today.
anapanasati. That's the only real meditation practice uh, that he taught and
Truly
recommended
endorsed
in
and
old days.
recommended. And it
Hmm.
makes sense to me because it goes with everything that, I mean, it's not as if you cannot generate or develop, I guess would be the better word, would be cultivate, I suppose, or collect the mind with contemplations of death. I mean, you can certainly generate, collectedness from that, but rather it doesn't always seem as if focusing on those dead things and just looking at them over and over and over again is the way to let them go, which is
Exactly.
one of the
That's the whole
understandings
point.
that, yeah,
But the
right.
charnel
But the
ground
thing is,
meditations were not gladdening the mind. The charnel ground
right.
meditations were not the complete practice. But
Yes. And we
but
see the same thing
contemplation
today
of
in the
death.
West.
Mhm.
Yeah. We see the same thing
So
in the West with the noting practice that's so popular here. It's like a lesser version of charnel ground meditation in a way because they simply note the hindrances. I'm not certain of the last
wow,
time.
that's exactly correct.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so
Okay.
but in the West we're so used to beating up on ourselves. Apparently,
Mm-hmm.
this is what is loved so much for a while, huh? But it makes sense
Uh-huh.
to me that we're not fulfilling the if we're simply doing, and it's not as if you went to one of the Mahasi monasteries, I bet they do something a little different too. I can't imagine that those monastics there weren't so inclined as to gladden the mind, if that makes sense. But when it came to the West, we latched onto the part that
All right. So
everyone's so
here's
attached to suffering. But if we
there
don't
are
gladden the mind, mhm,
many examples of that. For instance, Achan Samedo, Achan Amaro, Achan Pasanto, and the rest
mhm,
of them. Those guys were with Achan Cha were students of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa,
okay,
which has to do with the gladdening of the mind. Now,
hmm,
on the Mahasi method, that 16 stages of insight still has that there, but what happens is that um, the beginners will see the anicca, the
yes,
dissolution,
right,
the falling
yep,
apart, but it's only after the student goes what is often referred to as the dark night of the soul, when they
mhm,
begin to see the fearfulness and the misery and the disgust. That's
right,
when they take the right effort then. And when
to
they add the
abandon.
right effort, the redoubling of the effort, I think that is step 11.
Yes, right, because that's when they develop equanimity towards determination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly. So
hmm,
that's not exactly the practice of the teaching of the Buddha, because the teaching of the Buddha
right,
helps us to throw that stuff out every time we see it
yeah,
and brighten
yep,
the mind again.
and then get really good and
You
yep
don't
and
have to get
happy and
really, really
yep.
good at seeing dukkha before you
Hmm.
start throwing it out. You don't have to see the city dump when you all you need
Right.
to see is this
The gate.
basket beside the desk. That's
Exactly.
dukkha.
Yes, right. Yes.
Doesn't have to
Oh,
wait
that's
until it
perfect.
gets to the point of being your own private city dump.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
we
And
take
it's
it out, we
probably a
take the
lot easier.
trash out, we relinquish the trash, we do it because we can see it clearly without the hindrances. That the Mahasi method doesn't remove the hindrance and put the mind back in good state
Right, right.
until the
Interesting.
student finally sees the dukkha, and then he'll make the right effort.
Yup. Right. And eventually this can lead to what some sort of eventually it'll lead to dispassion and all those things for those people as well. But it certainly is not the fun way to do it.
It's not the fun way to do it, and it's not
No,
the
it's not.
easy way. It's
No, it's
not
not.
easy to do it that way.
No, that way sounds like it would be quite torturous. Oh, it's wild that we think of that being so important here that you have to suffer in order to get something done. Um,
And the
that
better thing
that
to do is that if you can see it, you don't have to suffer over it. If you can see it,
exactly.
if you can
Yeah,
see
you
that,
can let it
a
go.
rake, you know what a rake is, a leaf rake, okay, and
Oh
you
yeah.
can put it up
Mhm.
so that if the kid steps on it, he'll not only puncture his foot, he'll get hit in the face with the handle, okay, all
Yes.
right. How many times do we have to step on that rake, puncture our foot,
Right.
and get hit in the head before we figure out that we have to not just avoid that rake, but we
Yeah.
have to pick it up and put it away so that
Right.
it's not
Stop letting
dangerous at all? That's what the arahat does.
lock
He
it up.
takes that
Yep.
rake off. Okay, so the anagami sees that rake, but
Hmm.
he doesn't step on it.
Right.
The
Yeah.
arahat
Look
puts
on
the rake
top.
away so that there's no
Oh,
rakes out there. There's not dangerous now.
right. Right. Which is one thing I was asking about. It was the other text question I had asked you about with regards to internal, external. And it wasn't, and it was just a passing thought I had come up for me was about internal, external, and what internal, external has to do with appropriation or holding, you know, because I think that one of the ways that we contribute to this like dyad of, oh, this should or should not be there, is through how we perceive internal, external, whether or not we want to accept something within what we consider what arises in experience as our direct experience as, like, you know, let's say like the body, for example. So many people have so many problems with what's in or not in their body, whether it be, you know, feelings or whatever.
Mhm.
But when we appropriate that body, we start to consider it internal to us. You know, when we don't appropriate that body, we can consider it to be external, as in, not as in it's not our body, or like, oh, it's a zombie body or anything like that, but rather much more that our body arises in our experience the same as every other Dhamma, same as every other phenomena. So why would it arise according to our control? Meaning, why would it be able to have the feelings that we want it to have when we want it to have them for as long as we want it to have them? And when we accept that, it's not it's internalizing a locus of control for things that you actually have control over, you know, which is not very much, but it's much better than externalizing that locus of control to, you know, other people or the Dhamma itself, you know, the Dhamma themselves, the phenomena that
Well,
arise in our experience themselves.
here's one of the things that we can plug in for that, and that is
Okay.
that the difference between the internal and the external is that we internalize through determinations the
Yeah.
external. Okay, so if you have
Ah,
problems with one bully one time,
interesting.
you'll determine that, and now you're going to have continual trouble with continual bullies because there's because what we're
Yeah.
seeing is an input. But if we can
Ah,
see that the way that I behaved with that bully the first time didn't work,
right.
now let me go try something new.
Oh,
Which
I
means
love that.
now we can be in
Right.
the new here now. You see, most
Right.
of the time
Yeah.
when the guy meets the bullet the second, third, and fourth time, he remembers the first time and he has to replay that for it. It's a rerun. It's not
Uh-huh.
just the programming, it's the reruns.
The reconstructions.
Right. We reconstruct it, we redetermine rather than letting this
Oh,
moment be
how
brand new
joyous. Right.
without
Right.
carrying the past determinations
Right.
into it.
Our
and
common. Yeah.
and bringing those past determinations into the mix and putting that as part of the formula, that's what we call perception, and what we come up with is the salayatana, which is impinged with dirt,
Yes.
and that's what
Right.
impacts us and leads to our feelings.
Because that's when
But
we
if
have
we could just
contact.
keep
That's when we
input
have.
and input and input and input and input, we
Okay.
don't wind up in bad feelings because we didn't process it with our old determinations, our old crap.
Right. Absolutely.
And
That's awesome.
that's real
Love that.
freedom, is to stay in input
Ah,
mode.
right. And that's why I laugh so much while we're talking about this, man, is it just gets me so, puts the mind in such a wholesome state to talk like this about the Dhamma, because it's
Yes,
so
it
wonderful and
is.
it's so available. And I think, you know, the Buddha said it. He said it's available here for you to
Hmm.
see now.
Well,
Like
exactly.
it's not
That's what
elsewhere.
we've been doing. Remember, I talked about it in the sense of the Sutta number 10 and the Satipatthana is
Yeah.
that let's get out of the hindrances and let's talk Dhamma, because Dhamma is enjoyable. Dhamma is
Yes.
really good stuff.
Yes. It is a very, very good thing. It's
Hmm.
great stuff. Yeah.
Because we
That's
wind up
amazing.
being in a good mood when we think about, yeah, I could be free too. Yeah, we can do this.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I can keep my eyes open. I can watch what I'm doing. I don't have to
Yeah.
step on that rake.
Right.
And a lot of societies are set up so that they've got rakes all over the yard turned the wrong direction. Every step they take, they hit themselves in the head by puncturing their foot.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And all we have to do is just, in the beginning, we need to identify those rakes. The second thing that we
Yes.
need to do is to start avoiding them. And
Right.
eventually, we go clean up the yard so that there's no rakes out there to step on.
Yeah. Right. that's the source of it. Like we were saying about second noble truth, because that's the source of it. It's not that you did or did not step on a rake. It's that there are rakes in the yard. So if we get the rakes out of the yard, getting the rakes out of the yard is the third noble truth. The way that we get the rakes out of the yard is the fourth noble truth. Is that accurate?
Or at least this rake. At least this rake.
Yep. And because really the fourth noble truth is look, see it, is it there? Get it. Yep. Wonderful. That's a wonderful way to talk about that. I like that so much.
All right. Well, why don't we bring this to a close? I think that we pretty well discussed cessation. I think it is getting dead now. Let it go.
Toss it out. Perfect. Thank you, Dhammarato. That's so wonderful.
All right. Well, one last thing then, and that is that if you ever have a little bit of time, I've got a little project for you.
Okay. What do we got going down?
All right. Well, let's take it offline. But so we'll go ahead and end the call now. I'm really enjoying this call.
I am too. Thank you.
But it's time for it to be finished, so we'll let it go.
Okay. Sounds good.
All
See
right.
you later.
All right. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.